To support amendments 41, 42, 43 and 44. And can I say, I suppose, like others, I would have strong views on the subject of abortion. I suspect I'm probably in a minority position, both within this House and within this country. But as a number of the noble lords have said before, today's debate is not about abortion and what position any of us hold on that subject. That is potentially a debate for another day. I think there are two key points in relation to this piece of legislation which this group of amendments, I think, go to. Firstly, what is appropriate and proportionate in terms of the law? And secondly, how do we protect everyone's rights? I would agree particularly with Amendment 44 in Lord Farmer's, in his amendment in relation to that. Both, and I'll come to it in a moment, both in terms of dealing with some of the wording, and I think some of the wording that is very concerning that is there already in Clause 9, but also actually it is surely a time for a level of pause for thought. As Lord Farmer indicated, thankfully it is the case that we are not in the United States. We have had the current law, largely as regards abortion, has been in place for most of this country for longer than I've been on this earth. Just about, I would say, in terms of age, for any of you who want to guess my age in that regard. But it is a question that, as to why this is suddenly an emergency type situation. Are we seeing a scale of problems on the ground which there is existing law not in place for? I would say no, that is not the case. And I think we do need to have thoughtful law as to what the appropriate levels of protections can be put in place for everyone. And therefore I am very much minded towards the proposal which says, let us examine what actually the facts are, rather than rushing through a piece of legislation and indeed a clause which applies a particular, I think, draconian solution to that. The issue then of how we protect everyone's rights. There are elements within Clause 9 that I think no one in this House could ultimately disagree with. If we are saying, for example, that we want to protect in any set of circumstances anybody from intimidation or threats, in every situation in life, I think all of us would say, yes, protections need to be there. Similarly, in circumstances which we want to protect people from harassment, people being impeded or being blocked from something. Again, whether it is at a clinic or indeed any set of circumstances, everyone, I think, in this House would agree that those are protections which need to be there. Now, I would question the necessity of this clause on those grounds, because there are a range of laws that already provide that level of protection against threats, against intimidation. But leaving that aside, if that was all that was in Clause 9, then there would not be so much of a problem. But what we do have, and I appreciate Amendment 45 softened the language in some regards in relation to this, some of the aspects that are within Clause 9 at present, that we are going to criminalise anyone who advises or persuades, or attempts to advise or to persuade, or perhaps most worryingly of all, otherwise expresses opinion. We are making an expression of opinion, if Clause 9 goes through unchanged, a criminal offence. Now, the alternative wording that has been put in Clause 45 talks about making it criminal influencing. But surely at the heart of any democracy, at the heart of the concept of freedom of speech, the value of democracy, is in a peaceful way of people trying to persuade others to their point of view. It should be a battle of ideas. Now, I indicated clearly where that goes beyond the art of persuasion towards any level of threat or intimidation, clearly that is something which is unacceptable and should be criminal. But if we are making expressions of opinion or influence something which is criminal, that is something which I think is fundamentally wrong. As I said, as I indicated, I would have a different view than many within this chamber on the issue of abortion. But if we are to defend freedom of speech and freedom of protest, it is very easy for any of us to stand up and say that we believe in freedom of speech with something that we agree with, an issue that we agree with. It is very easy for any of us to stand up in this chamber or elsewhere and say, we support the right to protest whenever we agree with that protest. But surely the test within any free society is about defending the rights of people who hold opinions that we would disagree with, views which we would find unacceptable. Sorry, you looking to intervene?
Well, thank you for giving way. I understand the point he makes about the possibility of making the argument. But here's his argument that the best place to have that debate, or I think he used the words battle, is directly outside an abortion clinic as people approach at the point at which they might be receiving treatment.
Yeah, look, it would not be, let me make it clear, it's not a place that I would see myself being in relation to it. But the point is that people may take, if they're doing it in a peaceful way, if they're doing it in a persuasive way, may take actions and views which we, well, I appreciate it's good to see in relation to that the idea that we need to defend opinions and the right of protest and the right of free speech, even if we fundamentally agree with the opinion that is put within that, and the right to do it. And we know, as has been indicated already, that the problem is that in terms of interpretation of this law, as we've seen even with the PSPOs, it goes well beyond it's a level of mission creep, which goes well beyond simply the issue of threatening or intimidation, as we've seen already under PSPOs, people prosecuted, as we've seen, for simply taking part in prayer, for example. Now, if we are going to, as I said, defend the right of people for freedom of speech and freedom of protest, yes, that always has to be done in a peaceful manner. But let us do that for not simply the things we agree with, but the things not only that we would disagree with, but for even things that we would find repugnant. And as such, I believe that what is there in Clause 9 is something which is totally unacceptable. It mixes in, as I said, things that all of us would find perfectly reasonable with those things that go well beyond that. And I have to say, in seeking to criminalise an interpretation simply of influencing someone, I think is similarly takes it beyond what the bounds would be.